Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Easy Night In on Broad Radio. It's the World Cup edition. It is lovely to see you all here. I'm going to be joined by not one but two amazing guests this evening. So I'm going to firstly invite Michelle Redfern, who she is an incredible leader. Fantastic podcast called Advancing Women in Sport podcast. So she's going to be joining us first. At the same time, here she is. Oh my gosh. Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Jo. How are you?
Very well. It's good to see you. Thank you for joining us for an easy night in.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, it's not quite night because I'm in Perth at the moment, so it's afternoon. But I figured that it's an easy night in wherever I am with you, Jo.
Oh, you're so divine, and a very easy afternoon in Perth always. Our second guest is Sarah Karlik, who I'm going to invite now. Now, full disclosure, Michelle, I have never done this with three of us before, so fingers crossed it's going to work.
Well, I'm sure what they say. There she is.
Hello. Hello.
That was so easy. I can't even believe it. Why don't we do this all the time?
I was just thinking the very first time I did a podcast, I went, okay, Brene Brown says FFDs. Can I swear, Jo?
Yes, please. Yeah, please do.
Fucking first times. So there you go.
It's very beautiful to see the two of you. Before we begin, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I am broadcasting from. I'm on Bunurong country, so I acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to elders past and present. Because you're in Perth, Michelle, do you know where you are?
I'm on Whadjuk Noongar land, so I pay my respects to the people, the Noongar people, and I grew up on Noongar land up in Geraldton, in Western Australia as well. So pay my respects to elders past and present. And as Sarah knows, because she's heard me say this a lot, how much can we learn from the oldest continuous living culture in the world and civilization? How much should we be learning from our brothers and sisters who've been around for such a long time? So big respect.
Absolutely. And Sarah, I believe you're in Sydney.
That is correct. I am in Sydney.
So that would make you on Gadigal country, I believe.
That's my understanding, yes.
Yeah.
I was going to say I work on the pronunciations. Forgive me all. I've been in Australia for just about a year and a half now, still working on it.
Well, fantastic effort, I've got to say. So, yes, we do acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and always will be Aboriginal land. We are here to speak about the FIFA World Cup, now Women's World Cup. Although, is there any other? Honestly, I have to say, I have never engaged with soccer to the degree that I have. I am a fringe audience member, I've got to say. I'm not a sports lover to this degree, but wow, the numbers are incredible, the audience worldwide, the attendances at the game, the merchandise sales, everything breaking records. What is so special about the FIFA Women's World Cup?
So this is something that I had a chat with some of my teammates. I'm playing football in Melbourne, and because I am American and we have been quite successful over the last, number of years, I wanted to understand from their perspective, the Australian perspective, of what it means to host this significant sporting event here in Australia. And some of the things that they shared with me, I can just, as I read through their messages, just really feel that honor and that excitement, and just being able to see the passion in the words for what this means to them, and just some of the things that they're saying as far as it's a privilege and an opportunity to be able to host this event. And it's also nice to not have to wake up at 1 a.m., 3 a.m. to watch a game. So that was one of the first things that was also said. So as far as the engagement goes, just being able to watch the games in your own time zone and in your own backyard is something that's really special. And then being beyond that, it's what it means to the young girls, the boys as well, men, women, families that are attending these matches, and just being able to engage a wide range of audiences. I think that that's really exciting to be able to watch and be a part of. So it is something that's quite significant to the people that are here right now.
Yeah, Michelle, before you answer, I will just mention to those of you who are joining us, please feel free to share what your thoughts are. Why is the Women's World Cup so special? Because we've got some lovely people who've already joined us. And even if you've been to any of the games, we'd love to hear what that was like for you. Michelle, why do you think it's captured so many of our imagination globally?
I think, thanks, Jo. I think there's, there'll be as many different reasons as there are different people. And like you, I've never really not got into soccer, but I don't know the rules. And I know we joked about offside, and Sarah's going to have to educate us and all that kind of stuff. But I know for me, as not an avid fan, so I couldn't, I can't name the position. I mean, I know of forwards and strikers and backs and things like that. But for me, it's a couple of things. I remember really having women's soccer coming onto my radar when Megan Rapinoe took a knee at in America, and then beautifully baited number 45. I don't say his name, President 45. Didn't get invited to the White House, even though the US women's national team were, all triumphant. So her activism around Black people's rights, around equal pay, and things like that. That's what first captured my attention. And I really started to think, and she's such a, an energizing figure. And so, she's electric, right? So I started to pay a bit more attention, and particularly, obviously, because of the work that I do around gender equality, I started to pay attention to the things that were being looked at. So this Women's World Cup for me feels like there's a whole bunch of rock stars who are here in Australia, like sporting rock stars. It feels like something that, and I just looking at the numbers, the sheer numbers, the sponsorship, that could be more, but the viewers, the merch, the attendance. And I was only talking to my son earlier today, and I just said, when I was, not his age, I was a lot younger, but I remember mum and dad staying up late to watch the FA Cup final, and that was all men. And I don't know, there's just something, there's that fever about this Women's World Cup that is what I've observed in sport, for men's sport, my entire life. And I love that. I just love it. But it's, I don't know, it's fever, and it's, the women are on their front and centre. And then just last week or this week, after Australia had played Canada, I got a text from a colleague, and he said, "Wow, did you watch the game?" No, I didn't, because I was asleep. But he said, "Wow, the quality is so good." And I said, "Yep." He said, "Better than it was 25 years ago." And I went, "Yep." That's what happens. That's what happens when you invest and you pay attention to pathways, and you put money in, and you allow women to compete on a level playing field. Unlike, when I interviewed Moya Dodd, when she was a Matilda, they had to fundraise to get to training camps. They had to sew stuff on their own uniforms. They had to pay their own way. So for me, this is just the culmination of a whole bunch of different things, and it's joyous.
Yeah, it's so, I didn't give you a proper introduction, Sarah. You are a pro soccer player. So it must really rile you up when people make that comment, wow, the quality of the sport, that it's so good, like it's such good quality. You'd be like, yeah, does that really irritate you a bit?
I particularly love hearing now, I'm here in Sydney attending a conference, and I'm hearing more often now grown adult men who are passionate about football saying, I actually prefer watching the women's game over the men's game. To me, it's more interesting. And I appreciate, Michelle, the story that you shared as well, because that was something that I heard as far as people referring to the Women's World Cup, just shortening it. It's the World Cup. Are you watching the women's game? No, I'm just watching the game. And so I think that the language is really important. And this is something that I'm seeing for the first time, where we're not having to have that distinction and clarifying it. And we're just being more inclusive. So it's really special to be able to see.
Yeah. I want to mention from Katrina, who she is a long-time fan of Broad Radio, so we welcome you again, Katrina. It's great to see you. She says it's what the Matildas stand for on the pitch as well as off: Aboriginal rights, LGBTI communities and inclusion, and that reflects in who attends in the crowd. I feel like that's so often the case for women's sport. Would that be a good reflection of sport that women play generally, Michelle, do you think?
Yeah, and certainly the conversations, the observations, my own observations and experiences, and of course the research that I do says that there is a different kind of fandom when it comes to women's sport, and there are different atmospheres. And I've said often that I remember the very first time I went to an AFLW game on my own, because I thought, oh, it's at Carlton, I live in the city, I'm just going to grab the train, go up there, went in, sat down, bought myself a beer, sat down in the stands. There's two old blokes next to me, we had a good old chat, and I just sat there and I'm thinking, I would never ever have gone to a men's game on my own. And when I tell that story, people go, yeah, I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. The fans seem to be different. I don't know. There's this real sense of community, sense of support. Yes, we're fierce competitors on the field, but off the field, we're all like we're behind this really huge movement, and it just feels like it feels different. And I know that there are clubs and organisations who are really deliberately and strategically leveraging that point of difference, which I think is very smart. And I certainly know in that the game that you and I love, Jo, AFL.
Yes.
There's talk about the product, and they are two different products. The AFLM and the AFLW are two very distinct products. And clever organisations, whether it's the organisation that's putting a field on the team or the organisations in the ecosystem around sport, are saying, hey, we're not fishing in the same member, supporter, fan zone here. We've got a whole different ball game going on here. So I know that's kind of more than you asked, but it's different and it's great, and it's a huge opportunity. As a fan, as a supporter, as a partner, it's just different, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Do you feel that as a player? Do you feel that you're a part of something larger, like a movement, Sarah?
Yeah, I think that looking at my fellow teammates and former teammates that have played with me for other international countries, I think that when it comes to playing football, that we like to get behind a social cause. We like to be invested in more than just football. And yes, it's in part because in 5% of the world, we're able to make a realistic income. So yes, we do have to look at other avenues to be able to, support ourselves. That does mean a career or, part-time work while we're playing football. And so with that said, though, I think that that's what makes others more engaged in the women's sport, is because we do have that story to tell, is because we are, involved in other aspects. And so when it comes to that engagement and the social engagement, we do believe in something. I think that we all are passionate about something, and I would like to see more of those stories being told. And I think that that's something that will continue to help engage the wider audience as well, because people don't necessarily care about a product in quotes, but they care about the people, the person behind the jersey. So I really like to see that in the coming years.
I think for myself, as someone who is a fringe fan of sport outside of AFLW, that is, you're right, Michelle, that is my number one sport. But as a fan new to soccer and to the World Cup, most definitely I am driven by being part of this global movement that I know seeing women's sport front and centre has the the possibility of change in society, right? That is a knock-on effect, undoubtedly.
Absolutely.
And I want to be a part of that movement.
Yeah. And the whole thing is that sport is a lightning rod for social change and social justice. And I've had a number of energized discussions with people saying, oh, you got to keep politics out of sport. I'm going, politics has always been in sport. Sport and politics have been intertwined, inextricably intertwined for decades. So, saying now that we can't do that is rubbish. And I said, I think there's so many examples of where sporting identities of any gender who are admired and respected by a whole bunch of different folks, when they lead with their values and talk about their values and the things that they care about, it really makes a difference. And that's super important because honestly, I've said this so many times that my kids, who are kidults, they're adults, but certainly when they're a bit younger, they would no sooner listen to, whatever Prime Minister's sitting, they'd no sooner listen to a Prime Minister's, what to do than eat a box of hair. You put a sport star, someone that they admire for their prowess, their athletic prowess, you put them on the stage and have them talk about social justice issues. Hello, they're taking notice and it's shaping their thinking. So it's hugely important. And you're right, Sarah, we've got really, really strong women who are making taking very strong stances about what they care about, and they're using their platform really responsibly and ethically and with values. And it will help shape the social fabric of what we are and who we are. So it's terrific. And I certainly see, as I said, sporting stars of all genders taking a stance. But we've got this unique opportunity right now with this, this movement and these highly visible women who are very, very driven by their causes to really shape the way we do life. It's awesome.
So what kind of learnings or what kind of change would you like to see come from the Women's World Cup? Either of you.
Sure.
Yeah,
I can take that one first. So, and the reason why I'll jump in for that is legacy. We're talking about legacy, we're talking about lasting impact. It's something that is constantly on my mind, as a person, what's my legacy going to be, but looking at this World Cup, what's the World Cup's legacy going to be for this tournament? And as I reflected on that question today, and as I mentioned, I'm in Sydney, so as a short aside to help get to the point, I went to Bondi Beach today, and just walking along the beach walk, I came across Waverly Cemetery, and there's always been something about a cemetery that makes me, not to make it morbid, but there's always something about a cemetery, though, that makes me, reflect on life, reflect on legacy, of course. And so connecting it to that, reading some of their tombstones and how people were remembered, I think for me, what I'd like to see as the lasting legacy for this tournament is, first and foremost, I want to see more women in decision making and leadership positions. And second, I want to see the visibility, which we are seeing, thanks to TV broadcasting and all of that. We're seeing that increase and we're seeing that interest. And as Marta said in her interview after her final World Cup match, it's having a reference. So having somebody that you're able to look to. And she spoke about how we did such a poor job. I mean, we didn't have all the technology and the broadcasting that we did and do now. And so, hindsight 2020 for that. But for us moving forward, I want to see more women playing sport. I know for FIFA, we're currently at 29 million women and girls playing globally. And by 2026, people would like to increase that to 60 million. That'll be huge. That'll be significant. That is something that we should be striving for. But it's not just increasing that number, but how can we retain them then as coaches? And so continue to see that visibility for the generations to come, and not just, hiring somebody because they're female, but because we're also, supporting them in their development. And so I want to see a number of things happen, but the key thing being the women in decision making and leadership positions, and the second being that visibility factor and having a reference point for our girls and our women.
Yeah, it does feel as though we're getting this much sport broadcast and that much coverage because it's FIFA World Cup, right? And is that going to disappear once we move on from this very special event?
Yeah, and I think that, yeah, Sarah's couldn't have said it better myself, Sarah. More women in leadership, because we know that we get better outcomes when we've got gender balance. And of course, you add cultural balance to that as well. You're getting much better outcomes for the woman, for her family, for society, and of course, for the organisation that she's a part of leading. I want to take it more broadly than that, though, because, you know, this Women's World Cup has an opportunity to really highlight two things that are very near and dear to me, which is global gender equality, full stop, and having women in very visible role model positions who are also talking about and advocating for gender equality or eliminating gender inequality is super, super important. And the knock-on effect from that, as well as you know, I know you want to talk about it, Jo, is eliminating violence against women. And, you know, those are two key things that we need to have more women in those leadership positions to bring balance to our decision making that we make individually, collectively, and at a societal level to eliminate violence against women, because it's a scourge. It's a pandemic, and I don't use that word lightly because it is. And having those visible female role models actively saying, hey, this is important, pay attention to this matter, is going to help influence people to do all sorts of things. Number one, become aware. Oh, in Australia, one woman a week is murdered by a current or former male partner. And, you know, there's still a lot of people who aren't aware of that. And gender inequality leads to violence against women. So I think, you know, again, this is the societal change that I want to see as that legacy that knocks on from the Women's World Cup. That legacy is a fantastic word, Sarah, because it must have that ripple effect.
And it's been really heartening, I think, Michelle, that both UN Women Australia and UN Women Aotearoa New Zealand have actually collaborated with the Women's World Cup in a really formal sense with two campaigns, one being Unite for Gender Equality, which that campaign ends today, but then for the semi-final, they're going to have messages all around the ground and, you know, in and around all of their media, unite to end violence against women. I think that is profound that they're doing that in a really formal sense, you know, because we hear messages from, you know, in lots of different sports from individuals, but together as an industry, as a sport, they have said, unite together to end this terrible, terrible scourge, exactly as you say, Michelle. It's lovely to see so many comments along a way there. Life You Choose says, loving all the women umpires to see. I think that's true as well. It stands out to see that. I think also it's been really interesting how as an industry and as a sport and the media too, not just the fans, will call out when something hasn't been right. Like we saw the commentator in that first Matildas, and I see you reel back there, Michelle. We saw the commentator in the first Matildas game commenting about Katrina Gorry, motherhood hasn't blunted her competitive instincts. And I mean, everyone pulled him up, right? And it's sort of as a platform to really kind of refocus what is the right way of speaking about a player, and what is not okay.
And I think, you know, we have these systems, as Sarah said. We've got access to technology. You know, social media is an extraordinary tool, and I know, you know, it gets a bad rap for a whole range of reasons, but it also creates social change, because that kind of conversation would have gone through to the keeper, pardon the pun for using another, you know, sport analogy there, but it would have gone through to the keeper 20 years ago, maybe 30, it's definitely 30 years ago. But now we've got people going, oh, hang on, come on, Bali's, dude, that's kind of not on. And, you know, yes, it can cause a pile-on, but out of that, there will be people who will have observed that pile-on to that young fellow who's now ruining the day he uttered those words. But
It's true.
they,
His name is
they,
David Bashir, by the
yeah,
way.
I'd forgotten his name anyway. So just like he'd forgotten how to speak respectfully about women. But anyway, so those people have gone, oh, geez, I might have said that. Okay, now I know that's not cool. That is not a cool thing to say. So in and amongst all that, there's education. And, we say to people, the work I do, we've got to educate people. Most people don't want to be educated. I'm here to school you about gender equality, Jo. Oh, good. I'm so excited. Thank you. No. But what they can do through observing all of these different ways that we're communicating with each other as humans and calling each other out and calling each other in is going, oh, okay, right,
Yeah.
don't do that next time. Or, okay, that was very cool. So this is where this technology is so powerful and can be for the greater good as well. So if any of you have ever thought, oh, I won't call that out, please do, because you can call people out or call them in, depending what terminology you want to use. I know Rana Hussain is really good at explaining how to call people in. You can call them in and say, hey, that might not have been the best way to express what you were really trying to say, which was how awesome is that woman who has got her body back into condition after going through one of the most grueling things that a woman can do, which is be pregnant and give birth. And look at her, she's a rock star. So, I think that's the beauty of this kind of stuff.
And it was only, when did she, it was like only 12 months ago that she had that baby. Like, honestly, when my child was 1 year old, I could barely walk to the letterbox and back without thinking like, well, I deserve a piece of cake now.
Well, I was still telling people that I had to lose the baby weight. That's not how old's your baby? Oh, 15. What, 15 months? No, 15 years. But anyway,
Look, yeah, amazing. So, Sarah, you are doing a PhD in international women soccer players and their experience as soccer players. So, I mean, what kind of barriers do you face as a soccer player?
Yeah, there's definitely some stories that I can tell with that. One story being, I think that looking at things like the scheduling is something that's really been a challenge when it comes to being able to compete and perform at the highest level. So looking at here within Australia, I'll use the A-League women's team as an example. They're training early in the morning before they'll go off to work or school, for 8 hours. And I think it's really difficult to be able to perform at, an elite high performance level when we're struggling when it comes to, yes, they're not full-time in the sense of, being paid a significant amount of money to be able to dedicate the amount of time as the men are able to do. So I think that that's something that can be a significant challenge when it comes to advancing women's football. And even for the players that are looking to come here internationally, for the foreign talent, I think that I've had a lot of conversations over the last couple of weeks and months around this World Cup, because that's one of the good things about the World Cup is it's put Australia on the map as a desirable country for people to want to come and live, play, work. And so with that, it's the conversations just around what does training look like, what do matches look like, what do the season looks like. And again, there is progress that's being made as far as extending. Well, I should preface it by saying it depends on how you define progress, but there is, I'll say, quote, progress being made with regards to extending the season and trying to make it more competitive and increasing the number of teams. But I still think that that there's still work to be done to be able to make us the high performing elite competitors with the rest of the world as well. Yes, we're ranked currently 10th in the world for FIFA, but there's still, I think, like I said, just work to be done to be able to continue putting us on the map to compete globally.
I mean, all of that comes down to money, doesn't it? That's entirely about investment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's been interesting to read a number of articles when we're talking about showing us the money, the disparity between countries for this tournament. I saw today a friend that posted talking about the Jamaica national team having to have a GoFundMe to be able to compete for this tournament. So we're still seeing that disparity among the federations. And so I would like to be able to, you know, going back to legacy too, to be able to see that investment. And when it comes to the question of, you know, who do you want to win the World Cup, and or who do you think will win the World Cup? For me, I'll play with that answer and also just say I'd like to see, you know, a country like Jamaica, you know, win it, just to be able to show, in spite of the lack of those resources, they're able to use that, harness that, channel that, and still be able to succeed. And, you know, again, hopefully that's not like, we want to see that investment. We're not saying that they'll be able to perform like that year after year, but I hope that that will get the country, get the world talking and paying attention to these issues. So I think that this World Cup is particularly important in raising that disparity between these nations, these countries, because we collectively, we women, we deserve better. I'm from, yeah, we've been fortunate. It's a tough word. I know Michelle and I have talked about the choice of words, but because we've had our own issues where the grass isn't always greener on the other side. But I do think that any victory for women's football, whether it's in, you know, Panama or Philippines or the US, like, it's still a victory, you know, for us women globally. But I'd like to see that gap close. That's one thing that I really want to see change.
Yeah, absolutely. And particularly when you see how much money is being made for sponsors and brands and, you know, FIFA itself, and like there are a lot of people benefiting enormously financially from this huge success. And is that being passed on, you know, to the players who are bringing the crowds, right? Oh, I've lost your sound there,
Oh,
Michelle.
Sorry.
There you
Am I back
are.
again?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Yep.
You know, I think this is where Sarah's correct about having, I know Sarah's correct about having more women in leadership. And this is leadership across the whole sporting ecosystem. So the folks who are sitting around tables making decisions about funding, when we have greater representation of women around those tables, yes, they're bringing their lived experience, and one would hope their sisterhood, to that table to say, hey, you know, let's look for equitable solutions here. Let's look for equitable distribution of resources, you know, and those resources can be, yes, it's cash, and you know, cash is queen, as we know, but it's also equitable distribution of when matches are broadcast, where they're broadcast. So there's a lot of people locked out of the FIFA World Cup from watching it because they won't or can't pay for cable TV or pay TV. And, you know, so there's inequity there. And, you know, there's inequity in terms of, you know, who has access to what grounds, to medical staff, yada, yada, yada. So equitable decisions can be made when there's people around the table who bring lived experience to that table to say, how might we, you know, create a level playing field here. So, you know, this is the legacy stuff. We want this World Cup to start opening people's eyes and ears to the fact that there is significant inequity across sport. And, you know, one of the things that is related but not related is I read an article yesterday, you know, Paris Olympics next year is going to be I think the most gender equal from an athletic perspective. But you look at the coaches, meh, big red cross. So we just don't see women ascending into high performance coaching roles. And, you know, I've got some great friends and colleagues in Athletics Australia who did a study a couple of years ago that, you know, there are only around 10% of high performance coaches in athletics that are women. And because it's an inequitable, inhospitable environment, i.e., just as Sarah said, you know, they'll schedule trainings and meetings and et cetera, at times that are unfriendly or inaccessible to women. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff that we need to pay attention to enable these amazing women athletes to do their best on the field.
Well, I think, as we always, and it's an oft quoted thing because it's one of the most truest statements in the world, you can't be what you can't see. And you mentioned Marta there, Sarah, who is Brazilian great. She has retired, and she made this beautiful comment about, you know, when she was growing up, there was no idol. She didn't have a female idol. There were no games shown. But today, she says, we go out on the street and people stop and the parents stop. Oh, my daughter loves you. I mean, what a difference that's making to generations of girls who now not only might wish to play, but might consider a career in administration or coaching. That absolutely was not a conversation when I was growing up. And that is a huge shift, Sarah.
Absolutely. And I think about when I actually started watching games. I was watching men's games. I didn't start watching women's games until my late teens. Even though, you know, for me, I started watching games in general a lot later than maybe some other people did. But with then my peer group and teammates, it was interesting as, you know, I got older. It was interesting to look back and think about who I was talking about the games with. I was talking about the games with other men. I wasn't talking about the games with my teammates. They weren't watching games, whether it was men's or women's. But now I think that that's very different. I think that my teammates they're very, for besides the fact that it's the World Cup, but they're still watching games and they're still following Premier League teams, or for my American teammates, they're following the NWSL back home, the professional league back home. So whether it's men's, women's, they are engaged in those conversations. And I'll even just back up and say, I know that we want to be watching the women's game and showing up when we're talking about, you know, how do we make a change? You show up, you support, you buy the ticket, you get the butts in the seat. But for me, I still think that it is still step to be able to see from the women's game, to be able to see and hear people's at least watching games. Because I think that that's something that's been a challenge for me over the years, is just that women have not been watching any games or any sort of been engaged in any sort of sport. And I don't know if it's because once they hit a certain age, you know, they drop out of sport altogether. So there was never really that attachment to it. And I know that, you know, there's different motivations for playing. And so right now what we're seeing is the girls are more interested in the social aspect of the sport here in Australia. And so we're trying to find ways to engage them in the sport. But like I said, I just think that, going back to your quote for Marta, just being able to have people recognize that she's this icon on the street is something that's significant, because I didn't have that growing up, where I was able to identify some key female football players. Yeah, I just didn't have it.
I think it's interesting, though, that you talk about there how we motivate girls to watch a sport and really attach themselves with passion to a sport, such that it takes them through their whole lives, right? Again, Michelle, it's a different sport. It's a different kind of conversation. It's about engaging them for a different reason, other than watching sport for whether a team wins or loses. Women attach themselves in different ways. There has to be purpose and meaning to it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, 100%, Jo. And I was just reflecting as Sarah was saying that, going, ooh, that's not me. Now, you know, sample size of one, but I've been an avid Australian rules football fan since I can't remember when I wasn't, put it that way. But, you know, I also had a dad that was hugely into it. So I used to trail around after him as a kid, used to go to footy matches. And look, I grew up in the country in WA. So, you know, if you kind of didn't get into sport, you're a little bit odd, and I was odd anyway, so I didn't need any extra help in that regard. But, you know, footy for me in the country was very much part of the way we were. And the reason that I got attached to footy was it was part of life. It was part of mum and dad. It was part of the social fabric and what have you. But I absolutely loved the game. And whilst someone my age didn't have access to playing football, and I've got to say, I've never even dreamt of playing it as a kid. People go, oh, you're so sad you weren't able to play. I go, oh, in hindsight I am, but at the time I never even dreamt about running onto the field. Yes, I could do a drop kick because my dad taught me how to do one, but I never dreamed of jumping over the fence and playing. But I just loved the game. And as a, you know, frustrated fairly average netballer who was always in GK because I was a gigantor and fairly rough, you know, footy would have been great for me. So it was the technical side of sport, of footy, really interested me. So it is different, but I know when my daughter was playing netball and I was really involved in our local netball community, and the club that I was involved in, we were, again, so progressive in hindsight. I didn't realise it at the time, but we knew that girls, when they hit kind of, you know, they were going year 6, year 7, year 8, that was the time when things started to change for them. And, you know, they that was when the attrition rate started to jump in terms of girls dropping out of netball. So we made a really concerted effort to say what will keep them there. And it wasn't about winning, Jo, to your point. It wasn't about being the most technically proficient. Sure, we had some girls that wanted to go through the pathways and get into rep teams and things like that. But for the majority of those girls, they wanted to hang out with their mates, have a bit of a giggle and some good fun and what have you. So we forgot about the scoreboard and decided that we would keep friendship groups together. So where there were 3 or 4 girls who were really good friends, we would keep them together, irrespective of the ability levels. And guess what? We were successful anyway, but it kept them in the sport. And I think there's that, coming back to what we were talking about, there's that sense of, I'm here because I get to hang with some people who are like-minded. I can, you know, as Brene Brown says, I can drop the armor here. I can be me and not kind of have to be something else. You know, there's just, it's so many things to so many different people. And tapping into that is the challenge for the sporting administrator who wants to attract and engage and grow the women and girls in their sporting environment. And do you know what? You can't do that if you've only got blokes making the decisions, because they don't have lived experience. That doesn't mean to say they're not clever, because there are some clever men out there, but they need clever women who have been girls, who are women, who bring that lived experience. So I will never ever deviate from the fact that you've got to have that different lived experience. And then you layer on it, so what if I'm a migrant woman? What if I'm an Aboriginal woman? What if I'm a woman who's got an acquired disability? And you bring all of that and you say, hang on a minute, there's this whole new range of fans that we can bring in and engage in this amazing community. So we've got to have those different people.
I mean, it's even as simple as, you know, understanding that girls don't want to wear white shorts. It's so obvious, but unless you have women in the room, no man is going to think of that, right? But it's the most basic thing.
But you know what, when that first started coming out, I thought, why didn't I think of that? Because, you know, I thought, God almighty, I grew up as, you know, one of those girls terrified, you know, you've got to go and play cricket or play netball in your white bloomers. God, I hope I don't get my period, you know, unexpectedly, because shit, that'll be embarrassing. And when it came out, I went, of course. So fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. I've got to say, though, and this is where perhaps I'm going to call out my own gender bias here. I had assumed, because I'm not a competitive person, that women play because, yes, they've all those other things we've spoken about. But Sarah, you very clearly made a point to me that you play because, God damn it, you want to win.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It's been a long journey, I'd say, for me when it comes to playing. And I think that I'll also just back up. So with my career, so I played in a couple of different countries, been playing soccer since I was 5. And for me, in my off seasons, I would come back to the US and I would play with a lot of men's teams, whether they were U16, 17, even here in Australia, I'm playing with U21 boys in addition to the training, because we're only training 2-3 times here right now in the season that I'm currently in. So to be able to supplement that, I am playing with men. And it's interesting just to be able to, like, when I go back home and I play with them, like, I feel like I'm part of the crew, right? Because I feel I'm much more comfortable in that competitive space, where we want to perform at the highest level, where we want to perform at, you know, our personal best, whatever our goals may be. And so it's an environment where I've always felt comfortable in. But I know that hasn't been the case for some of my friends. Not so much now, because my friends, most of them, when we do go back and we're playing, they are elite performers as well. So they prefer that too. That faster combative tempo. But growing up, yeah, we, like a lot of my girlfriends, they would want to, go and do other things. They wouldn't necessarily want to go practice 1v1 moves in the backyard. So those were some of the early days. And I want to say that's why I became a defender, is because I only wanted to play defense. I couldn't take on the boys because I wasn't fast enough. So that wasn't fun for me. So I'd rather just keep them in front. So I do credit the boys that I played with growing up, because that's probably how I was able to go the places that I've gone and play in the position that I have. But yeah, it's been a challenge. But at the same time, I'm grateful for being able to have those experiences growing up, because it's made me the person that I am today. And I thought about this a lot too. I hope that this isn't too much an aside, but it's been on my mind because I was talking about this yesterday with these two Americans that I met here in Sydney going to the Panama-France game. We were just chatting about what soccer has meant to us, and what playing has meant to us and done, for us, taught us for as far as life lessons. And for me, I have that drive and that ambition and that passion because of what sport has done for me. And I would really like to be able to have that, for not to say that you have to play at for your national team or for, professional football, but just be able to have those transferable skills that soccer has been able to afford me. It's why I'm able to walk in the gym and feel so confident, even though I'm surrounded by men most of the time, but it doesn't faze me. And having that power is so important. And it goes beyond sport. It goes into your workplace too, especially when you do, like myself, work in a predominantly male environment, although Melbourne Victory does do, well when it comes to that balance. But for a lot of the environments, it's predominantly male. And for me to be able to walk in and be able to talk to mostly men, and not be phased, that's something that I think is pretty powerful, that I'm thankful to have sport in my life for.
Oh, look, my daughter, my 14-year-old plays footy, Aussie rules, and she walks taller because of it, because it's a contact sport, because it's okay to be competitive, unapologetically competitive, in a way where often I think women are told it's not okay to want to win.
Absolutely.
I can see how powerful that is for you as a player. And Michelle, just, we talk about the impact throughout society that sport can have. That's a really intangible one, that if women and girls are playing in a space where they're allowed to really want to win, God, that changes how you interact with other people, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, I look at, there are a couple of different studies out, and depending which one you want to look at, but let's just go for the average. Between 80 and 94% of Fortune 500 CEOs who have been women played competitive sport. And they have, and I think it was either EY or Deloitte, one of them anyway, one of the studies, they talked about what Sarah said, those transferable skills and the edge that playing competitive sport, and often it was team sport, where they brought these skills into the way that they did leadership and the way they did work, and that competitiveness particularly is really useful. And when women get told to dial down their ambition a lot from birth, I always say women are marinating in the patriarchy. We are marinating in societal expectations about be more of this and less of that and what have you. Sport, so I'm so pleased for your daughter, Jo, because that's why I used to get so many penalties as a goalkeeper in netball, because I was aggressive. I was a really aggressive player. I was a really assertive player, I should say. I was aggressive.
I hope you won't be offended when I say I'm not surprised to hear that, Michelle.
No, I know. No, people go, oh, geez, what a shock that you'd be aggressive on the court, Michelle. Yeah, woo! But because I didn't have that outlet, and it was, and so I think that this being able to be unapologetically competitive and ambitious, and if sport's an outlet for that, you beauty, that is awesome.
Yeah.
But how do we, as you've said a couple of times, Sarah, how do we keep women in that pipeline and then help them with those skills to say, this is going to stand you in good stead for life? And then conversely, having society recognise that an assertive, ambitious, competitive woman is a really good thing.
Yeah.
So this is
Yeah.
so many things.
So many things, and we are running out of time. We haven't even spoken about how amazing Matildas are yet. Oh my God. So, I mean, 4-0 against Canada, which, you know, all of us were fearful it wouldn't happen because, of course, Sam Kerr's been injured. And, you know, I know so much about the sport now, Sarah. Although I still don't understand the offside rule. That will never make sense to me. But what are Matilda's chances moving forward? We need to just get a quick précis, and we're heading into playing Denmark on Monday, I believe.
Well, I guess that one is a question for me and not Michelle, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a challenging match. I think that what's exciting about this World Cup is we're seeing that it's not always a guaranteed win. It's the teams are becoming more competitive, and it means that a lot more work is going to have to be done to be coming out on top. And so I think that, you know, Australia does, you know, stand a good chance to be able to come on top for Denmark. It's really just going to depend on the recovery, because I know it's been, you know, a significant tournament taking those hits, but hopefully, you know, for the sake of Matildas, we're able to see Sam Kerr at least once in this tournament. So yeah, but it'll be a good match.
I don't feel like you're backing us there.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michelle.
I just want to reflect on Canada though, because this is a real story of inequity. Canada came in, and I'm taking nothing away from the Matildas here because I know I'll get a pile on if I do, but Canada came in really, you know, underprepared and undercooked because their own federation didn't give them the opportunity to prepare properly. So, you know, there is no national women's league in Canada. And for the Canadian team to prepare, I mean, Sarah, I'm talking about your area of expertise here, but, you know, for them to prepare, you've got to do some really significant prep, like really hard practice games. And this is beyond training, right? Training and drills, they know these things inside out, but those really hard practice games, the opportunity to play in front of crowds, things like that, these are all part of the prep, and they just weren't able to do that. And this is not a once-off. This is a legacy, again, that legacy issue. So the Canadian team have done it really tough because their own federation, their own country really hasn't backed them to the extent that they should have done. So again, this is the inequity that plays out sometimes in quite surprising ways.
Didn't they? See, I'm surprised to hear that, because didn't they win, weren't they world champions, or didn't they win gold at the Olympics?
Yep.
Unbelievable.
They absolutely did. Yeah.
But looking at the go on, Jo.
You go, Sarah.
I was just going to say, looking at the investment, Australia is a good example of that. So doing my own research and having a few chats, Australia is still a favorite to win the World Cup, and not just because we're co-hosting the World Cup, but we are standing toe-to-toe with top-ranked teams in the world. And just from what I understand, this is in large part due to the Australia 2000 project. So Australia wanted to compete better in the Olympics and on a world stage. And so they invested a lot into sports science and sports science education. And now 23 years later, we're seeing those payoffs. And dating back to 2015, Australia gave the women's national team, the U.S. women's national team, a real game for 60 minutes before they began to fade. But then a few years later, they went and beat the U.S. And now they have some of the fittest and the fastest players in the world. And these are direct descendants of that project, that protocol. And what's exciting about this team as well is that most of our players are 25 years of age or younger. So I think that that's incredibly promising for the years to come. But just looking ahead to this next match, I do think that it will be a good one, and I do hope the best for Matildas. But again, I am American, but like I said, ultimately, I'm more interested in what's to come of this World Cup than just having a winner. It's more about that legacy that I'm really excited by.
Well, that is such a fantastic perspective to finish this conversation on, Michelle and Sarah, both of you bringing the proof that investment, who knew, ends up with success in the sport. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, and you know, but also that long-term strategic thinking. You know, the 25 years ago, Australia set its cap at having a world-class competitive team. So these things don't happen overnight. And you know, right now, my call to action for everyone right now is to say, have a look at, you know, have a look at what could be possible in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and 20 years, and get behind it now. And, you know, what is it Steve Jobs said, the crazy people who inherit the earth? Well, they bloody well will, because they're the ones who are saying stuff now to say, oh my God, everyone's going, that's bonkers. It's not bonkers. It's not bonkers to get behind women's sport. I've been saying this for nearly 10 years. Invest in women's sport, build it, they will come. And they is everyone. So there's such a payoff, you know, in every sense of the word, to back women's sport.
Oh, well, thank you so much for this awesome conversation, Sarah and Michelle. I do apologise for being very biased and loving Matilda so much, Sarah. I know you are American, and I do wish the American team very well as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And at some point, you will explain to me the offside rule. I've just given up at the moment.
Can I join
Michelle,
you on the lesson as well?
Yeah, you're welcome. We'll do a separate one just for all of us who go, I don't understand. Michelle, thank you to you also.
No worries,
always
Jo.
Gorgeous to speak with you. And thank you so much for your leadership in the gender equality space. It's amazing what you do.
Back at you, sister.
And Sarah, thank you so much for the work you're doing for women's soccer, football, as you call it.
Of course, of course. Thank you for having me
Thanks
on.
everybody for joining us. We love you for your engagement with Broad Radio. We're a growing startup, and very soon, in the next sort of 3 to 6 months, you're going to be able to see us more and more, or hear us more and more, as we're developing our app and developing our content and developing our radio network for women by women. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, everybody have a fantastic rest of your evening or afternoon, Michelle.
Thank you. Go Matildas.
Bye all.